Hi everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of My Autistic Mind. So in this episode, I am going to give you a little explanation about my diagnosis and learning about autism and understanding it. So I was 14 when I was diagnosed. My aunt was actually the one that noticed the behaviors in me, and she told my grandparents, I think she has Asperger's syndrome. And they took me to a psychiatrist who confirmed the diagnosis. But I didn't find out myself until like a year later, when I was almost 16. When I was at the doctor's office with my grandmother, like having a physical or something. And my grandmother told the doctor she has Asperger's syndrome. And I'm like, what? What is Asperger's syndrome? Am I sick or something? Because it was a whole new name. I've never heard of that before. And she kind of told me what it was, and I'm like, that's why I'm so different. Because I always wondered why I behaved the way I did. Why was I always so sensitive? Why did I not always understand jokes or understand when someone was joking and when they weren't? And a lot of times I would take their jokes seriously because I didn't know they were joking, because I can't pick up on social cues. Why did I get so nervous so easily? Why was I so childlike for my age? Because most other kids weren't into stuff like Bear in the Big Blue House and Barbie dolls and other stuff that most 5 or 6-year-olds like. But I was a different teenager. I honestly didn't really know what all the other kids liked because I didn't really have a social life, I guess you could say. But it was nice to finally have an answer to why I was the way I was. But even then, it took a long time to understand it and understand what is Asperger's. But before, whenever someone would ask me, why do you have such sensitive feelings? I would never be able to give them a valid explanation. I couldn't tell them why. I couldn't explain. I was just like, I don't know. I guess I was just born that way. And then they would tell me, well, you need to toughen up, or you need to stop being so sensitive. And that always made me feel just so ashamed of myself, because it's not like I was doing that on purpose. You know, I'm not purposely trying to be too sensitive and take things the wrong way. That just happens to be one of my autistic traits, and I'm going to get into these traits in this series. In each episode, I'm going to explain a different trait, and I'm also going to maybe give a little advice on how you can maybe handle it, like from my point of view. I am not the kind of person that can give you parenting advice, so parents, if there are any parents of autistic children watching, I don't want to give you bad advice. All I can do is just tell you things from my point of view. So but that's basically what this series is. But anyway, it was nice to have an answer. But even then, I still couldn't really give a solid explanation to people. It took me a long time to understand Asperger's. So even then, I would tell people, well, the reason why I'm so sensitive, or the reason why I behave like this, is because I have Asperger's syndrome. And they were like, what? What's Asperger's syndrome? Or some people would actually say to me, well, I think you're making excuses. In fact, I remember this one time one of my teachers in school pulled me aside, and I'm not going to say who it was because they might be watching and I don't want them to get their feelings hurt, because that's not my intention. But they pulled me aside and they wanted to talk to me about something, and I didn't respond well to it. I got my feelings hurt, of course. And then I told them, I can't help it. I have Asperger's syndrome. I can't help it that I'm getting my feelings hurt. And they're like, don't make excuses. And that just really hurt me. I mean, it wasn't their intention. I know that. And, I forgive them, obviously, because plus it was a teacher I really liked and still like. So if this teacher is watching, please no hard feelings. I'm not mad at you. But I'm just telling my story. But it always hurt, when people would tell me I'm making excuses, or I'm using my Asperger's as as a crutch or whatever. But yeah, it took me years to understand what exactly is Asperger's syndrome. And then a few years later, I was told it's a form of autism. And I'm like, okay. And even then, it took a long time to understand it. I looked up, the autistic traits on the internet, and I was like, oh, I'm starting to understand this a little bit better. And I joined a social group for adults on the autism spectrum. And that group has really helped me a lot. It's helped me learn a lot more about myself, and it provides kind of like an outlet for me to just go and be myself and be around a group of people that understand and that don't judge me. And it's a fun group that I've been going to for 9 years now. And I have also met some great friends that have taught me a lot about myself. One of my friends in particular is Cindy, aka Stream of Awareness, and she does a lot of autism related videos as well as some other awesome videos, and I highly recommend you guys check out her channel. But it was her that really taught me more about my autism, because she has some similar traits, and I'm like, yes, I do that too. And then I found other autistic vloggers like Amethyst Shaver. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but she really dives deep into every different autistic trait, and I'm like, yes, I do that, or no, I don't have that trait. But because of these awesome people, I am able to understand myself a whole lot better. I'm able to explain myself a lot better to people when they ask me. And now I don't really tell people I have Asperger's syndrome. I tell them I'm autistic, because so many times, when you tell someone I have Asperger's syndrome, they're like, what? What's that? But when you tell them I'm autistic, they're like, oh, okay. There was actually one time when I told someone that I had Asperger's syndrome. This was years ago. And they were like, oh, I'm so sorry. It sounds like a horrible disease. I'm like, it's not a disease. It's a disability. But then I told them, oh, no. It's not a disease. It's a form of autism. And they were like, oh, okay. But yeah, it is really nice to finally have an answer as to why I behave the way I do, why I respond to things the way I do, why I have different tastes, why I see things differently. And over the years, I have come to realize that autism is both a curse and a blessing. It's a curse because you still have to deal with the ignorant people that refuse to try and understand, and they don't listen to you when you try to explain yourself, and they still sit there and they criticize you, and they tell you how they think you should be handling things and how they think you should be living your life and what they think is best for you, when they don't really know enough about you to make that call. But it's also a blessing because I see things differently from most people. I see the world in a different light. I have different ideas than most people, and it's also part of why I am so creative, because it is true that people on the autism spectrum, I'm not saying all people, but it is true that a lot of people on the spectrum do have special talents and special interests. I know that there are some people that probably don't, so don't quote me on that, but I'm one of the people that does have a special interest, and that is music, and it's also writing. So yeah, it is great to have a creative outlet where I can express myself and tell my story and talk about my issues through my music and through my writing and my creative side. And it's great, autism it's a curse and a blessing. And I remember a few years ago, my granddad told me, you've got to take the bad with the good. When I was telling him how frustrated I was about how I am so sensitive, and he's like, I understand, but you've got to take the bad with the good. And I'm like, thank you for saying that, because that just makes me feel validated, because it just makes me realize that autism is both a disability and an ability. And it's also not a disease, and I don't need to be cured. I am not sick. Do I look sick to you, people out there who think that autism needs to be cured? I mean, yeah, there's some things that I can't do. And there are some things that I can't handle, but there's a lot of other things that I can. So anyway, that is basically a brief explanation on my diagnosis and learning about it and getting to know myself better. So that's it for now, and in the next episode I am going to be talking about sensory processing disorder. So stay tuned, and bye!